We are Bob Brigade and I am Rod, and I'm here to help you make money with your 3D printer. Now today I want to talk about how to maximize the potential of your 3D printer and get the most amount of money out of items that you yourself make and print. And I want to touch on three major things. Number one is speed, number two is material, number three is post-processing. So biggest thing when it comes to speed, best thing that I ever did or I ever found out was about nozzle sizes. I myself print mostly and only on 0.8 millimeter nozzles, but I do have smaller nozzles than that for more detail. Now, the detail that you lose when it comes to a bigger nozzle size isn't that big of a deal, especially if you're going to post-process the item, like do some sanding or some bondo or, you know, spray paint it or something like that. Then it doesn't matter. You should go the fattest nozzle as possible. Now, another misconception is that you need some sort of specialty nozzle thing that you gotta upgrade your printer, and that's honestly not true. I print out of Ender 3 Pro, and I just straight up bought the cheapest nozzle on Amazon that I could find. It was like a pack of whatever, you know, like 20 of them, and I just unscrewed it. Obviously heat up the nozzle, unscrew it, and then screw your new one on there, and that's all you need. You don't need anything else, no special settings. That's basically it. The only issue that I saw was going to a 1 millimeter nozzle. When you hit that 1 millimeter nozzle, you can still do things in special modes, but there's a lot of layer gaps that are formed, and the layer adhesion just isn't there. So you'd have to do like some C-steps adjustments on that. But speed kills, and you need it. You need to get a bigger nozzle. Number two thing on speed, it's the layer height, right? So say you change the nozzle size and then you don't change the layer height, you won't see that much of a benefit when it comes to, you know, the upgraded nozzle. Normally, when you put, like say on Cura, you put that you have a 0.8 millimeter nozzle, the resolution of the layer height is going to be 0.32. I personally go all the way up to 0.62 on my 0.8 millimeter nozzle. And there's not much difference, honestly, unless you have really, really small details. And when I mean small, I really mean small. Not just like, you know, a regular, like the eye of a Pikachu. Like that stuff's still going to be well detailed. You're still going to be able to see it. You need to change the layer height, and that will save you so much time. So say you don't want to change your nozzle size, so you're not sure, you don't want to lose a lot of resolution. What you do is you just change the layer height on your 0.4 millimeter nozzle. So just go ahead and you know, up the layer height on that, you know, like 0.16 millimeters. Just play around with it. You'll see how much time you'll save. I mean, we're talking about cutting your time in half at least. So if you're printing big things or things that are going to get sanded down, you need to absolutely do this. Now the next thing is going to be the speed. So normally people tell you, oh, up the speed on your 3D printer in your slicer. Now from what I've seen in my experience, once you get to about over 80, you know, maybe 100, there's not much time being saved from pushing the limits on your 3D printer. As well as you can introduce a lot of, you know, artifacts on the print, which then could make you lose an entire print, and you don't want to do that. I personally print very slow, especially when it comes to like PETG or specialty, you know, other type of specialty plastics. I'll print very, very slow and then save the time with the nozzle and with the layer height. So I would suggest that you probably don't go over 80 or 100. And if you do, just check your slicer. Even when you push it to the max, there's not going to be any significant amount of time being saved. When it comes to speed, you know, do it push that machine to like 80 or 100, but no more. I keep mine personally at around 40. Now here's a trick though. Here's a trick that I found is instead of putting the speed of the entire machine up, what you do is you go to the infill. Now so I put just a regular, speed setting. I put that 40 or 50, maybe 60. But, right, on the outer layers, it's slower, so it's like 40, 50, 60. But then on the inward layers, on the infill, that's where I jack it up. I put that sucker to like 80 or 100. So then what's going on? You got to think about all these little other things, right? So on the outside, you want it to have good detail. So you're going slow on the outside. But when it comes to the infill, you're going really fast. And then you'll save time and you won't introduce any artifacts into your print. So the last thing in speed though is also base mode. Base mode is super, super helpful. I would suggest that you try to use base mode, and I suggest that you try to design specifically to use base mode, because base mode uses such little amount of material and it's so fast. And the added bonus of having a big fat nozzle is that the object that you print in base mode, the wall will be very thick and very sturdy. And so you can do very useful items, not flimsy items, when you use base mode with a fat nozzle. So this is the biggest thing that people see. They say, you can't make money 3D printing because it takes too long. Well, there's things that you can do, obviously, like we just discussed, to bring that time down. And as you bring that time down, you'll see that you will be able to print more and more things that can actually make you money. So let's go up to the next topic, which is material. So the next biggest cost is actually how much plastic you are using to make the item that you are trying to sell. And that's going to bring the price up, right? The more material you use, the more it's going to cost. So how do you keep the cost down but still have a good product? Okay, my first suggestion is going to be that you up the walls, not the infill. So instead of putting 100% infill, for example, what I will do is I'll put 6 walls and I'll put like 15% infill. It depends, right? So think about it this way, right? If you have a structure that's more of a box, so it's got 4 sides, right? Bottom, then sides, and then top. So what happens is you need infill in there because you don't want the top, the roof of it to droop. But you don't need that much infill. If you want to make your structure very hard, you should make the walls thicker, not more infill. And that will save you tons, like incredible amounts of material. Not only that, but it will also save you on time. Why? Because the extruder's not coming back and forth, making crisscrosses or cubes or whatever it is that you're selecting on your infill, but rather it's just making lines. It's already on that trajectory, making that line. It's just going to make a couple more lines and then it's going to add the infill. So in my experience, making an item with 6, 8 walls is going to have just the same toughness as an item made with 100, anywhere from 75 to 100% infill. And it will cost you less money and less time. So how else can we save money on material? Well, my suggestion is only print in PLA. That's it. Don't use PETG or ABS. And some people might hate me in the comments, but only print PLA. Try to print as many things in PLA as possible, right? That will save you so much money and you'll be able to get more products out. Not only that, but PLA is not only less expensive, but it's so much easier to use, so much user-friendly than any other material out there. There's certain things that PLA can't do, right? Like it's not super flexible. So obviously there's other materials that you're gonna have to use, like TPU. That's a great material, fairly cheap and very rubbery, So obviously PLA can't do everything, but you want to print as many things as possible in PLA. So now going on with this PLA, taking it a step further, is instead of using PETG or ABS, bake the PLA. So you make the part out of PLA, and then you bake that sucker, and as you bake that, it's going to make it way stronger, and it's going to be able to withstand being outside. I've done tests myself where I baked a PLA and then put it outside, and then had another non-baked PLA and put it outside, and the baked one did not warp when there was a lot of heat. Now, how did I bake mine? So I baked mine on the dehydrator at like 105, 110 degrees, and I just put it in there for about an hour or two and then took it out. Now, here's the really weird thing that I found. On a really hot day, if you put pieces out in the sun, they will actually bake, and then you'll get the same exact outcome. If you live in a hot enough environment, I think that you can put your pieces outside. Just be careful, because there can be some deformation that's caused from, obviously the heat. So I think that very delicate pieces, you might not be able to use this, but in very thick, dense pieces, you can definitely use this. With not a lot of detail, you can definitely use that. And you should experiment, man. Just experiment. That will save you tons of money down the line if you experiment. So bake the PLA. Make as many things as possible in PLA. The next thing is going to be in buying the same thing. We're talking about PLA now because it's just the best material, I think. The best thing you can do is hop on Facebook and just look for PLA. There's all these companies selling PLA for very, very cheap. I personally have bought this PLA, I'll show it now. It was $120 for 10 kg of PLA. That means every single spool of PLA is $12. So that significantly, drastically changes the price of the items that I make, or the amount of money that I can potentially make on the items that I sell. And that's a big game changer. So PLA and big PLA and buying in bulk, that's your best friend. Another thing you can try is a smaller nozzle. So a smaller nozzle not only will give you better quality, so more detail, but it will also use less material. So if you're trying to print small objects with, a lot of detail, even if they don't have a lot of detail and they're small objects, you might want to go with a smaller nozzle, because then that means that there is less material coming out of the machine. Okay, so let's talk about the last thing, which is post-processing. So we lose a lot of time, and we put a lot of effort into the post-processing of 3D printed items. So you need to start looking into things that will help you bring down the post-processing time. And one of those things is just simply don't do it. A lot of times I just don't do a post-processing. If you have the settings correctly on your 3D printer, it comes out looking very, very nice. Now, post-processing also means making things in such a way that they print easier, so that you don't need to have rafts or any supports, because supports and rafts and brims and all that stuff, that's all material that you're basically throwing in the trash. So you want to design items in such a way where you don't need any of that. And then when you don't need any of that, then you also don't have to remove it, which means that you can mass produce something that you don't even have to be there for, right? Your 3D printer, you can automate it, and it can just pump out these things, and then they're done, right? You don't have the extra step of taking things off that you're just gonna basically throw away in the trash. So design with a mindset of, hey, I don't want this to have any sort of supports, and that will save you tons and tons of time. So the last thing on the post-processing is, don't just think about 3D printed items, but think beyond your 3D printer. So maybe you want to just 3D print molds. If you just 3D print molds, then you won't have to worry about the post-processing or the layer lines or this and that of the shortcomings of, you know, a 3D printer. But you can make the item out of another material using your 3D printer, or adding to your 3D printed item some sort of other material, right? Just making a piece of the item out of a 3D printed material. The entire item doesn't have to be 3D printed. It can be made out of many, many different materials, and in that way you'll see that you'll save a lot of money and time, and you'll have a better, nicer product. So I hope these things help you. I know they help me, and they're things that I spend a lot of time and effort just trying to look and study and find what works best. Honestly, I think that you can make this a full-time job. You can absolutely make 3D printing a full-time job. So hope this helps you guys. If it did, leave me a comment, a like, you know, consider subscribing. Love you guys. Have a good day.